The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and desperation. Marcus Chen had been waiting for 3 hours, his worn sneakers squeaking against the polished floor every time he shifted his weight. The envelope in his pocket felt heavier with each passing minute. Final notice, eviction in 7 days. His mother's medical bills had drained everything, and now even the cramped apartment they called home was slipping away. Marcus Chen, a nurse appeared, clipboard in hand. "Doctor, Victoria Ashford will see you now." He followed her through a maze of hallways, past rooms filled with expensive equipment he could never afford. The nurse stopped at a door marked Private Office and gestured for him to enter. Marcus stepped inside, and his breath caught. Dr. Victoria Ashford stood by the window, silhouetted against the city skyline. She was younger than he expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to calculate his net worth in a single glance. Her white coat was pristine, and a stethoscope hung around her neck like a status symbol. Everything about her screamed money, power, control. "Mr. Chen, please sit." Her voice was crisp, professional, with an edge that suggested she didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I understand your mother is one of my patients. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer." Marcus swallowed hard. "Yes. The treatment you recommended, the clinical trial, my insurance doesn't cover it." "I'm aware." Victoria moved to her desk, pulling out a file. "I've reviewed your financial situation. You work 3 jobs, you're behind on rent, and you have approximately $200 in your checking account." She looked up, her gaze penetrating. "I also know you're honest, reliable, and according to your references, fiercely loyal to those you care about. I don't understand. Did you call me here to tell me what I already know, that I can't afford to save my mother?" The words came out harsher than intended, but exhaustion and fear had worn his patience thin. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Respect, maybe. "No, Mr. Chen, I called you here to offer you a job." Marcus blinked. "A job? I'm not qualified to work in a hospital, Dr. Ashford. Not that kind of job." She stood, crossing her arms. For the first time, Marcus noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw tightened before she spoke again. "I need you to pretend to be my husband." The words hung in the air like a surgical blade suspended over flesh. Marcus stared at her, certain he'd misheard. "Excuse me?" Victoria turned away, looking out the window again. "My grandmother is dying. She has 6 months, maybe less. Her final wish is to see me settled, married to someone who loves me, not married to my career." Her voice wavered, almost imperceptibly. "She's threatening to change her will, leave her entire estate to charity, unless I prove I can prioritize family over work. And you can't just tell her the truth?" "The truth?" Victoria's laugh was bitter. "The truth is I've spent 15 years building my career. I'm one of the top oncologists in the country. I've saved hundreds of lives, but to my grandmother none of that matters because I don't have a husband and 2.5 children." She faced him again, and Marcus saw something vulnerable beneath the armor. "I can't lose her thinking I'm alone. I won't." Marcus rubbed his face, trying to process this surreal conversation. "Why me? You're a millionaire doctor. You could hire an actor, someone trained for this." "Because actors lie for a living. You don't." Victoria pulled out a contract from her desk drawer. "I've done my research, Mr. Chen. You're genuine. Your mother's nurses say you visit every day, even when you're exhausted. You read to her, hold her hand, make her laugh. That's the kind of person my grandmother would believe I'd fall for. This is insane." "Perhaps. But I'm offering you $500,000. Victoria set the contract on the desk between them. "Half up front, half when my grandmother passes. Enough to cover your mother's treatment, your debts, and set you up for years. All you have to do is attend family dinners, act affectionate in public, and convince an elderly woman that her granddaughter found love." Marcus's heart pounded. $500,000. His mother could live. They could keep their home. He could stop working himself to death across 3 jobs. But this was fraud, wasn't it? A lie wrapped in luxury. "What happens when your grandmother passes? We just suddenly divorce. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, I need an answer, Mr. Chen. My grandmother's birthday dinner is tomorrow night. Either you're there as my devoted husband, or this offer expires." He looked at the contract, then at Victoria Ashford, this stranger who held his mother's life in her manicured hands. She was cold, calculating, clearly used to getting what she wanted. But beneath the ice, He glimpsed something familiar, desperation. She was as trapped as he was, just in a different kind of cage. "If I agree, we do this right," Marcus said slowly. "No half measures. If I'm going to lie to a dying woman, it's going to be a beautiful lie. I won't disrespect her or your family by giving a lazy performance." For the first time, Victoria Ashford smiled. It transformed her face, softening the harsh angles, revealing the woman beneath the doctor. "I wouldn't expect anything less. Do we have a deal?" Marcus picked up the pen, his hand trembling slightly. He thought of his mother, of her smile, of how she'd sacrificed everything for him. She'd understand. She had to. He signed. "Welcome to the family, husband." The Ashford estate was obscene. Marcus had seen wealthy neighborhoods from bus windows, but nothing prepared him for the sprawling mansion, with its manicured gardens, fountain entrance, and staff who looked like they earned more than his annual salary. Victoria had picked him up in a sleek black Mercedes, and during the drive, she drilled him on family details with the efficiency of a general preparing for battle. "My grandmother is Eleanor Ashford. She's sharp, so don't underestimate her. My father, Richard, runs the family's pharmaceutical empire. My mother, Diane, cares only about appearances and social standing. I have one brother, Jonathan, who will either ignore you or interrogate you, depending on his mood." Victoria glanced at him as she pulled through the iron gates. "And remember, we've been secretly dating for 8 months. We met when you brought your mother to the hospital. I was charmed by your devotion and wit." "Wit? You've barely seen me smile." "Then perhaps tonight you should try it." There was a hint of amusement in her voice. "We got married last week in a small ceremony because we couldn't wait. It was impulsive and romantic, everything I normally wouldn't do, which is exactly why grandmother will believe it." Marcus tugged at his collar. Victoria had taken him shopping that morning, transforming him from exhausted hospital visitor to polished gentleman. The suit probably cost more than his rent. "What if I mess up, say something wrong?" Victoria parked and turned to him, her expression serious. "Then improvise. The key to a good lie is confidence. Believe it yourself, even if just for tonight." She reached over and adjusted his tie, her fingers brushing his neck. The touch was impersonal, clinical, but Marcus felt his pulse quicken anyway. "And Marcus, thank you for doing this." Before he could respond, she was out of the car, her mask of composure sliding back into place. Marcus followed, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in his stomach. The front door opened before they reached it, revealing an elderly woman in an elegant wheelchair. Eleanor Ashford had white hair styled in soft curls, kind eyes that missed nothing, and a smile that could melt glaciers. "Victoria, darling." Eleanor's voice was warm but frail. "And this must be the young man who finally captured your heart. Come here, let me look at you." Marcus approached, unsure of protocol, but Eleanor extended her hand and he took it gently. "Mrs. Ashford, it's an honor to meet you. Victoria's told me so much about you. And she's told me almost nothing about you, which means you must be special. She only guards what she treasures." Eleanor's eyes twinkled. "Tell me, how did my granddaughter, who once told me she'd rather dissect a cadaver than go on a date, end up married?" Victoria stepped closer, and Marcus felt her hand slip into his. Her skin was cool, soft. "Grandmother, Marcus is different. He reminded me that life exists outside hospital walls." "I didn't do much," Marcus added, finding his footing. "I just talked to her like she was human, not a medical machine. Turns out, underneath all those degrees and accomplishments, there's a woman who laughs at terrible jokes and cries during sad movies." Victoria shot him a look, surprise mixed with something else. Eleanor laughed, delighted. "Oh, I like him already. Come, dinner is ready. The family is eager to meet you." The dining room was intimidating, all crystal chandeliers and oil paintings of stern ancestors. Victoria's father, Richard, sat at the head of the table, his expression neutral but assessing. Diane, her mother, wore diamonds that could fund a small country and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Jonathan, Victoria's brother, leaned back in his chair with casual arrogance. "So, Marcus," Richard began once everyone was seated, "what is it you do?" "I work in logistics, property management, and food service." Marcus kept his tone even. Victoria had coached him, "Don't lie, but don't elaborate unnecessarily. Multiple ventures to stay busy." "How industrious," Diane's smile sharpened. "And your family? Are they in business as well?" My mother raised me on her own. She worked 2 jobs to put me through college. She taught me that wealth isn't measured in dollars but in character. Marcus met Diane's gaze steadily. I think she'd like Victoria very much. Your mother sounds remarkable, Eleanor interjected warmly. I hope to meet her soon. She's currently undergoing treatment for cancer, Victoria said quietly, her hand finding Marcus's under the table. But she's a fighter, like someone else I know. The squeeze she gave his hand felt almost real. Marcus squeezed back, and for a moment the elaborate dining room faded, and it was just the 2 of them, united against scrutiny. Jonathan leaned forward, studying them with calculating eyes. This all seems very sudden, Victoria. Last Christmas, you told us you were married to your work. Now, barely a year later, you're married to a man we've never heard of. Forgive me for being skeptical, Jonathan. Eleanor's voice carried a warning. Your sister is happy. Can't that be enough? I'm not skeptical of Victoria's happiness. I'm skeptical of his motives. Jonathan's gaze turned to Marcus. What does a man with your background want with one of the wealthiest women in the state? The table went silent. Marcus felt Victoria tense beside him, ready to defend, but he spoke first. You want to know what I want? I want to wake up next to someone who challenges me to be better. I want to hear about her victories and hold her through her defeats. I want to build a life with someone who sees people as more than their bank accounts. He turned to Victoria, and the words came easier than expected. Your sister is brilliant, dedicated, and yes, sometimes cold as ice, but she's also brave enough to fight for strangers every day, and foolish enough to take a chance on someone like me. So forgive me if I don't apologize for loving her. The silence stretched. Then Eleanor began to clap, her eyes glistening. That, my dear family, is what love sounds like. She looked at Victoria with undisguised joy. I'm so happy for you, darling. Victoria's expression was unreadable, but her grip on Marcus's hand tightened. Thank you, grandmother. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and subtle tests, but Marcus and Victoria navigated them together, their fabricated story becoming smoother with each retelling. By the time they left, Eleanor was beaming, and even Richard seemed grudgingly accepting. In the car, Victoria drove in silence for several minutes before pulling over on a quiet street. She turned to Marcus, her carefully constructed facade cracking. What you said in there about what you want, it was perfect. I meant it. The words surprised him. Not the part about us, obviously, but the sentiment. That's what love should be, shouldn't it? Victoria looked away, her voice small. I wouldn't know. I've never had time for it. She took a shaky breath. My grandmother looked so happy tonight. For the first time in months, she wasn't thinking about dying. She was thinking about love and future and hope. You gave her that. We gave her that, Marcus corrected gently. This was your idea, remember? She laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her, a ridiculous idea that somehow worked. Victoria turned back to him, and in the dim car she looked younger, vulnerable. I know this is just business, Marcus, but thank you for making it feel real tonight. Maybe that's the secret. If we're going to lie, we might as well lie beautifully. Victoria smiled, and Marcus realized with a jolt that he was beginning to enjoy her company. This cold, brilliant woman who bought his loyalty was becoming something unexpected, human, and that terrified him more than any family dinner ever could. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Marcus found himself spending more time at Victoria's penthouse than his own cramped apartment. It was practical, she'd explained. They needed to seem like newlyweds, which meant learning each other's habits, memorizing small details that couples would know. The guest room she'd offered him was larger than his entire apartment, with a view of the city that took his breath away each morning. But it wasn't the luxury that was getting to him. It was Victoria. He'd expected her to be distant, treating their arrangement like a business transaction with clear boundaries. Instead, she was surprisingly thoughtful. She remembered he took his coffee black, started keeping his favorite cereal in the pantry, and once left a note saying his mother had called and sounded good. Small gestures that felt genuine, though he knew they were probably just part of maintaining the illusion. You're overthinking again, Victoria's voice cut through his thoughts. They were in her home office, supposedly working, him on his laptop handling his actual jobs remotely, her reviewing patient files, but she'd caught him staring into space. Your face does this thing when you're wrestling with something. Your eyebrows furrow and you chew your bottom lip. I didn't realize you were paying that much attention. I'm a doctor. I'm trained to observe. She set down her pen, studying him with those sharp eyes. "What's bothering you?" Marcus closed his laptop. Over the past weeks, he'd learned that Victoria appreciated directness. "This is starting to feel too real. The other day I almost called you honey in front of the barista. We weren't even pretending for anyone important." Victoria was quiet for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she stood, moving to the window. "I know what you mean. Yesterday I found myself wondering what you'd think about a case I was consulting on. I wanted your perspective, your outsider's view that cuts through the medical jargon." She wrapped her arms around herself. "That's dangerous, isn't it? Getting comfortable." "Is it?" Marcus joined her at the window. "Maybe it's just survival. We're spending so much time together, it's natural to start caring. It doesn't have to mean anything beyond friendship." "I don't have friends, Marcus. I have colleagues, staff, family members I tolerate, and patients I save. Friends require vulnerability, and vulnerability is a luxury I can't afford." She turned to him, her walls firmly in place. "Don't mistake convenience for connection." The words stung more than they should have. Marcus stepped back, nodding. "Message received. I'll remember this is just a job." He left the office, retreating to his room, and missed the way Victoria's face crumpled the moment he was gone, the way she pressed her hand to her chest as if to contain something breaking inside. The next day, Eleanor requested their presence for lunch. The old woman was thinner than before, her strength visibly waning, but her spirit remained fierce. They ate in the garden, spring sunshine warming the carefully tended roses. "Tell me," Eleanor said, setting down her tea, "what was your first kiss like? I want to hear every detail." Marcus and Victoria exchanged glances. They'd prepared stories about their first meeting, their first date, even their wedding, but somehow they'd never discussed their first kiss. "It was, well," Victoria started, floundering. "Unexpected," Marcus interjected smoothly. "We were leaving the hospital after a long shift. Victoria was exhausted, stressed about a patient. It was raining, and neither of us had an umbrella. We stood under the awning, and she was ranting about insurance companies and bureaucracy, and she looked so fierce, so passionate." He turned to Victoria, and the memory he was inventing felt strangely real. "I couldn't help myself. I just kissed her, right there in the rain." "And?" Eleanor leaned forward, enchanted. Victoria picked up the thread, her voice softening. "And I slapped him. I thought he was taking advantage of a vulnerable moment." She smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "Then I grabbed his collar and kissed him back properly, because it was the first time anyone had looked at me, really looked at me, and seen past Dr. Ashford to just Victoria." "That's beautiful," Eleanor whispered, her eyes misty. "Hold on to that, both of you. Hold on to the moments when you see each other clearly." After lunch, as they walked to the car, Victoria was unusually quiet. Marcus finally broke the silence. "I'm sorry if I overstepped with that story." "You didn't, it was perfect." She stopped walking, turning to face him. "Marcus, about yesterday, what I said, I was wrong. You're not just a job. You've become something I didn't expect. Something that scares me." "What's that?" "A friend. Maybe my only real friend." Victoria's vulnerability was raw, unguarded. "I've spent so long building walls, I forgot what it feels like to have someone on my side without ulterior motives. Even though you're here because I'm paying you, you've never treated me like a paycheck. You listen, you challenge me, you make me laugh at 3 in the morning when I'm stressed about a surgery. That's not part of our contract, but you do it anyway." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a dangerous warmth spreading through him. "Victoria, I need to tell you something. The money, it's not why I'm still here. I mean, it was at first, absolutely. But now—" He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "Now I look forward to coming home to you. I want to hear about your day, share mine. I care what you think, how you feel. That's not fake, and it's not friendship." The air between them crackled with unspoken words. Victoria stepped closer, her hand reaching up to touch his face, her thumb tracing his jawline. "What are we doing, Marcus?" "I don't know. Breaking the contract? Complicating everything?" He covered her hand with his, leaning into her touch. "Falling for each other like idiots?" "I don't fall. I'm too controlled for that. And yet here we are." Marcus's heart pounded as he lowered his head, giving her time to pull away, to retreat behind her walls. But Victoria didn't move. Instead, she rose on her toes, closing the distance between them. Their first kiss was nothing like the story they'd told Eleanor. It was hesitant, questioning, filled with uncertainty and hope. Victoria's lips were soft against his, and Marcus felt the world narrow to just this moment, this woman, this unexpected connection that had grown in the spaces between their lives. When they pulled apart, Victoria looked shaken, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. "This is a terrible idea." "The worst," Marcus agreed, his forehead resting against hers. "It violates every principle of our arrangement. Completely unprofessional. We should stop right now." But Victoria's hands were tangled in his shirt, holding him close. "Absolutely. We should definitely stop." Marcus kissed her again, and this time it was deeper, more certain. This time, it was real. They stood in the Ashford estate driveway, two people who'd started as strangers, bound by contract, now bound by something infinitely more complicated. When they finally made it back to the car, Victoria drove with one hand, the other held firmly in Marcus's grip. Neither spoke, both lost in the terrifying realization that their beautiful lie had transformed into an inconvenient truth. That night, Marcus lay in his guest room, unable to sleep. Around midnight, he heard a soft knock. Victoria stood in his doorway, wearing pajamas and an uncertain expression. "I can't sleep." "Neither can I. Can I stay? Just to talk?" "Just to, I don't know, be near someone." Marcus pulled back the covers in answer. Victoria climbed in, maintaining a careful distance, and they lay in the darkness, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about medical school, the pressure to be perfect, the loneliness of success. He shared stories about his mother, his struggles, his dreams of a simpler life. As dawn broke through the windows, Victoria had migrated closer, her head on his chest, his arm around her. They'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. Their pretend marriage had become the most real thing in either of their carefully constructed lives, and neither had any idea how to survive what came next. Eleanor Ashford passed away on a Tuesday morning in late spring, surrounded by family, believing her granddaughter had found true love. Her final words to Victoria were, "You're glowing, darling. That's what love does. Never let it go." The funeral was a grand affair, hundreds of mourners paying respects to a woman who'd been a pillar of society and philanthropy. Marcus stood beside Victoria, no longer playing a role, but genuinely supporting the woman he'd fallen impossibly in love with. She'd cried in his arms the night Eleanor died, her grief raw and unrestrained, trusting him with the vulnerability she showed no one else. After the funeral, Richard Ashford requested a family meeting. They gathered in Eleanor's study, and Marcus moved to excuse himself, but Victoria grabbed his hand. "Stay, your family." Richard cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Grandmother's will was read this morning. As expected, she left the bulk of her estate to Victoria, approximately $50 million, along with this house and her foundation. He paused, his gaze shifting to Marcus. "However, there's a condition. The inheritance only transfers if Victoria remains married for at least 1 year. If she divorces before then, everything goes to charity." The room fell silent. Victoria's face went pale, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. Eleanor had known. Somehow the old woman had seen through their performance, or perhaps she'd simply been thorough, ensuring her granddaughter wouldn't immediately abandon the happiness she'd found. 1 year, Victoria repeated numbly. She wanted to make sure it was real. "It's a manipulative clause," Jonathan interjected. "You could contest it." "I won't contest grandmother's wishes." Victoria's voice was steady, but Marcus felt her trembling. "If she wanted me to remain married for a year, then that's what I'll do." After the family dispersed, Victoria and Marcus returned to the penthouse. They'd been living together for 2 months now, the guest room long abandoned, their relationship evolving from pretend to passionate to something deeper neither had words for. But this new complication hung between them like a surgical curtain. "You don't have to stay," Victoria said finally, standing by the window where they'd had so many pivotal conversations. "I can pay you the remaining half of what we agreed upon, plus extra for extending the timeline. You'd still get enough to cover your mother's treatment and more." Marcus stared at her back, at the rigid posture that told him she was terrified of his answer. "Is that what you want? For this to remain a transaction, I want you to have a choice. I won't trap you with my grandmother's manipulations. Look at me, Victoria. He waited until she turned, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I'm not here because of the money anymore. The check you gave me covered my mother's treatment. She's in remission, doing well. I have enough to start over, to build a real life. So why do you think I'm still here? I don't know, she whispered. Tell me. Marcus crossed the room, taking her face in his hands. I'm here because I love you. I love your brilliant mind and your terrible bedside manner with everyone except your patients. I love how you cry at sad movies but pretend dust got in your eyes. I love that you're terrified of being vulnerable, but you trust me with your heart anyway. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I don't need a year to know this is real. I knew it the first time you laughed at one of my stupid jokes. Victoria broke, tears streaming down her face as she clung to him. I love you too. I didn't think I could. I didn't think I had room in my life for love. But you made room. You showed me that success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. They held each other as the sun set over the city, two people who'd started with a contract and ended with a commitment that transcended any legal document. That night, they made love with a new urgency, a new honesty, celebrating the fact that their pretend marriage had become the foundation of something genuine. The next morning, Marcus woke to find Victoria gone. Panic seized him until he found a note on the pillow. Gone to see my mother, come with me. They drove to Diane's estate and Victoria was uncharacteristically nervous. I need to tell her the truth, how we started, how it changed. I can't build a real marriage on lies, even to my family. Diane received them in her sitting room, regal and composed as always. Victoria took a deep breath and confessed everything. The arrangement, the contract, Eleanor's condition, and most importantly, the love that had grown despite it all. When she finished, Diane was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. Do you think your grandmother didn't know? Victoria blinked. What? Eleanor called me a week before she died. She told me she suspected your marriage started as a business arrangement. Diane's expression softened. She said she didn't care. She'd watched you with Marcus at that first dinner. She saw how he looked at you, like you hung the moon, and how you looked at him when you thought no one was watching, like you'd found something precious you didn't know you'd been missing. She knew that whatever brought you together, what kept you together, was real love. She knew, Victoria breathed, and she left the condition anyway, because she wanted to give you permission to prioritize your happiness for once. The condition wasn't about the money, darling. It was about ensuring you wouldn't run back to work the moment she was gone, that you'd have a reason to nurture this relationship, to give it time to grow. Diane stood, embracing her daughter. Your grandmother gave you the greatest gift she could, a reason to choose love. Leaving Diane's estate, Victoria was quiet, processing this revelation. Finally, she said, we should get married again. For real this time. No contracts, no conditions. Just us. We are married, Marcus pointed out. Then let's renew our vows. In front of everyone, I want to promise to love you with no prenups, no escape clauses, no backup plans. Just faith that what we built from lies has become the truest thing in my life. 6 months later, they stood in Eleanor's garden, now legally theirs, exchanging vows they'd written themselves. Victoria's family attended, along with Marcus's mother, healthy and radiant in her recovery, wiping happy tears throughout the ceremony. Dr. Victoria Ashford, brilliant oncologist and millionaire heiress, promised to love Marcus Chen, the man who taught her that the greatest wealth was connection, not currency. Marcus, holding both her hands, said, you hired me to pretend to be your husband. But somewhere between the lies and the dinners and the late-night conversations, I stopped pretending. You became my best friend, my partner, my home. I promised to spend the rest of my life proving that the best decision you ever made wasn't becoming a doctor. It was taking a chance on love with a man who was just desperate enough to say yes to a crazy proposition. They kissed as husband and wife for real this time, and the applause from their guests faded into background noise. In that moment, there was only them. Two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something beautiful from a foundation of deception. Later, at the reception, Victoria pulled Marcus aside. Pressing a folded paper into his hands, he opened it to find their original contract, torn into pieces. I don't need this anymore, she said simply. "We never really did," Marcus replied, pulling her into his arms. "The best contracts are the ones written on hearts, not paper." They danced under the stars in the garden, where Eleanor had once watched them with knowing eyes, where she'd seen the truth before they'd admitted it to themselves. The millionaire doctor, who'd thought she had no time for love, and the struggling man who'd agreed to pretend had discovered something neither expected. That sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a whispered proposition and a desperate yes. Their story had started with pretense, but it would continue with promise. And in the end, that was the best diagnosis either could have hoped for. A lifetime of love. Genuine and gloriously real. Growing in the space where lies had once lived. They'd played their parts so well they'd forgotten they were acting, and in doing so they'd stumbled into the most authentic relationship either had ever known. As the evening ended and guests departed, Marcus and Victoria stood alone in the garden, holding each other close. "No regrets?" he asked. Victoria smiled, the genuine expression that had become her default when she was with him. "Only that I didn't bump into you sooner. We found each other exactly when we were supposed to. You needed someone to save your grandmother's heart. I needed someone to save my mother's life. Turns out we saved each other instead." They walked hand in hand into their future, leaving behind the contracts and conditions, carrying only love and the promise of tomorrow. The mansion that had once felt like a mausoleum now felt like home, filled with laughter and possibility and the messy, beautiful reality of two people learning to build a life together. And somewhere, Marcus liked to think, Eleanor Ashford was smiling, satisfied with the results of her final, brilliant manipulation. She'd given them a reason to stay. They'd found a reason to never leave. Tentar novamente o Claude pode cometer erros. Confira sempre as respostas. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional romance stories. We'd love to know where in the world you're watching from, so drop your country or city in the comments below. Your support means everything and helps us bring you more incredible stories like this one. Thank you for watching and being part of our community.